At 18, Martha's life was a simple, yet demanding, one. She was the anchor of her family, a silent partner to her mother in their small grocery shop, a sanctuary carved out of the city's relentless energy. Her hands, though young, were calloused from stacking cans of sardines and weighing heaps of Gary, a testament to her dedication. While other girls her age dreamt of university degrees and grand careers, Martha found a quiet contentment in the steady rhythm of their shop. It was a humble existence, but it was hers, and it was filled with the unshakable love of a mother who had sacrificed everything for her. The shop, nestled in a bustling lane, was more than just a place of business. It was a home, a school, and a theater where life's dramas unfolded. Martha knew every customer by name, every vendor by sight. She was a keen observer of the world around her, her mind a repository of stories overheard and lives glimpsed. Yet, beneath the calm exterior and the dutiful diligence, a quiet yearning pulsed within her. She was a bird with clipped wings, observing the vast sky but never daring to take flight. She had read about the world beyond ABA's dusty streets in old, discarded magazines, seen it flicker on the blurry screens of the community television, and imagined a life filled with different sights and sounds. The city of ABA was her comfort zone, but it was also a gilded cage, and sometimes, the bars felt a little too close. Then came Princess. Her name alone conjured an image of royalty, and she arrived like one, a whirlwind of high fashion, city swagger, and an intoxicating scent of expensive perfume that instantly set her apart from the earthy smells of ABA. At 22, she was Martha's older cousin, but she felt like a visitor from a different planet, one of flashing lights and grand promises. Princess was everything Martha wasn't. She was bold, she was self-assured, and she moved with the confident grace of someone who had seen and conquered the world. She spoke of Lagos not as a city, but as an empire of opportunity, a place where dreams were not just dreamt but lived, a magical land where hard work translated into instant success and where the streets, she claimed, were paved not with gold, but with sheer possibility. Princess's visit was a stark contrast to the quiet routine of Martha's life. She spent her days scrolling through her sleek smartphone, her laughter ringing out at a volume Martha wasn't used to. She recounted tales of lavish parties, of riding in air-conditioned taxis, and of meeting important people who held the keys to the city's vast wealth. Each story was a sharp, dazzling shard of glass reflecting a life of effortless glamour and freedom. As Martha listened, a seed of envy, not of the bitter kind but of a deep, sorrowful longing, began to sprout within her heart. Princess's world seemed so far away, so completely unattainable, yet now, here it was, in the same room, close enough to touch. The days blurred into a heady mix of Princess's captivating stories and Martha's quiet yearning. The humble grocery shop, which had always been a source of pride, suddenly seemed small, its walls closing in on her. The familiar scent of onions and dried fish was no longer comforting, it was a reminder of a life she was desperate to escape. The longing in her heart grew into a persistent whisper, a plea for a different path. Finally, with a courage she didn't know she possessed, she gathered her resolve and approached her cousin, her voice a soft, desperate tremor. "Princess," she began, her eyes pleading, "when you go back to Lagos, please, take me with you." She wasn't asking for a ticket to a better life, but for a chance, a sliver of hope to see what lay beyond the familiar horizon. Princess, caught off guard by the request, laughed it off at first, her response a casual dismissal. She told Martha that Lagos was a city for the strong, a place that would chew up and spit out a girl as innocent as she was. "It's not for you, Martha," she'd said, her voice laced with an unusual tone of protectiveness. But Martha was resolute. She begged, she pleaded, her argument simple and heartfelt. She spoke of her dreams, of her desire to do more than sell groceries, of the potential she felt was trapped within her. Her pleas chipped away at Princess's defenses, a relentless river carving a canyon through rock. After days of relentless persuasion, a long, weary sigh finally escaped Princess's lips. She looked at Martha, her expression a mix of resignation and a sadness Martha couldn't comprehend. "Fine," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I'll take you." The journey to Lagos was a kaleidoscope of new sensations for Martha. The world outside the bus window transformed from the familiar ochre of ABA's red soil to a sprawling canvas of verdant countryside, and then finally, into the dense, pulsating concrete jungle of Lagos. With every kilometer they traveled, Martha's heart thrummed with a nervous excitement. She watched the other passengers, their faces a mosaic of different stories, and felt a profound sense of anticipation. This was it. This was the first step on a new path, a bold leap into the unknown. Princess, who sat beside her, was unbothered, her posture relaxed, her gaze distant, as if she had made this journey 100 times. She was a seasoned traveler, and Martha, a wide-eyed novice, was simply following in her wake. As the bus pulled into the chaotic sprawl of the Lagos Park, Martha's senses were overwhelmed. The air was heavy with the smell of exhaust fumes, the blare of horns, and the endless stream of human traffic. The city was a living, breathing entity, a beast of immense power and energy. The towering billboards, the congested expressways, the sheer number of people rushing by in a blur, it was all so much bigger, so much more than she had ever imagined. The city felt alive, full of a raw, untamed potential. It was nothing like the orderly chaos of ABA. It was a different kind of world entirely, and in that moment, as she stepped off the bus and into the thick Lagos air, Martha felt a jolt of exhilaration, a sensation of pure, unadulterated freedom. The future stretched out before her, bright and full of promise. Princess's apartment was a shimmering contradiction. From the outside, the building was a nondescript block, but the moment Martha stepped inside, she was greeted by a world of polished marble floors, sleek, modern furniture, and a cool, artificial air that was a world away from the humid heat of the streets. The apartment was a perfect reflection of Princess herself, glossy, stylish, and a little too polished to be true. As Martha settled in, a feeling of awe and confusion settled over her. Princess's possessions were an endless display of luxury, designer clothes spilling out of her wardrobe, expensive jewelry glinting from a case on her dresser, and a collection of shoes that could have filled an entire shop. Martha, who had known a life of frugality and hard work, found herself bewildered by the sheer amount of opulence. It was a life built on a foundation she couldn't see, a world that seemed to have no discernible source. Princess, however, remained frustratingly vague about her work. When Martha asked what she did to afford such a lavish lifestyle, Princess would simply smile and say, "I'm a businesswoman, Martha. The big city has many opportunities." Her responses were like an empty promise, a perfectly wrapped gift with nothing inside. The mystery of her wealth, far from being intriguing, began to feel unsettling. Princess had a schedule that was a puzzle in itself. She was often out late, sometimes not returning until the early hours of the morning, her face a mask of exhaustion and something else Martha couldn't quite name. She was always on the phone, her conversations hushed and guarded, her tone shifting from playful to serious in an instant. The more time Martha spent with her cousin, the more she began to feel that the life she was being shown was not the full picture, that there was a hidden dimension to Princess's existence she was not privy to. The honeymoon period of Martha's Lagos adventure was short-lived. The initial excitement began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Princess's behavior became more erratic and harder to ignore. Men, always different men, would come to the apartment at odd hours, their faces a blur of shifting expressions. Some were charming and jovial, their laughter echoing through the halls, while others were cold and quiet, their presence feeling like a heavy shroud of silence. They would leave just as quickly as they came, sometimes leaving behind wads of cash that Princess would casually tuck into her bag without a second thought. Martha, accustomed to her mother's meticulous accounting and the slow, steady flow of their small shop's earnings, found this easy money deeply troubling. It felt as though it were tainted, a currency earned not through labor, but through some secretive, unmentionable means. The glamour of the apartment began to feel hollow, a stage set for a performance Martha was only now starting to understand. She would lie awake at night, listening to the muffled sounds of Princess's late-night conversations and the creak of the front door as she returned. Her cousin, once a beacon of effortless confidence, now seemed perpetually tired, her eyes holding a deep sadness that she tried to hide behind a plastered smile. The life Princess had so skillfully painted for Martha was beginning to chip and peel, revealing a darker, more complex reality underneath. The beautiful city, with all its lights and promises, was starting to cast a long, foreboding shadow, and Martha's heart, which had been so full of hope, now felt heavy with a sense of dread. The truth, when it came, didn't arrive as a dramatic explosion but as a quiet, crushing revelation. It was late one evening, and Princess, exhausted and distraught from a difficult encounter, had left her phone on the sofa. A notification, a harsh buzz in the silent room, drew Martha's attention. It was a message from a man named Emeka, a name she vaguely recognized. The words on the screen were a punch to the gut. "Thanks for last night, Princess. You were worth every kobo." The meaning was unmistakable. Martha's hands trembled as she scrolled through more messages, brief, transactional conversations, a language of money and services, of promises of pleasure and demands for payment. The picture was complete, horrifyingly so. Her heart pounded in her chest as the full weight of the truth descended upon her. Princess, her beautiful, worldly cousin, was a commercial sex worker. The discovery was a maelstrom of emotions, shock, betrayal, and a deep, soul-crushing sadness. It wasn't just the nature of Princess's work that shook Martha to her core, it was the realization that the glamorous life her cousin had paraded was a cruel facade, a bitter lie built on a foundation of self-destruction and exploitation. All the stories of parties and important people were nothing but a smokescreen to hide a life of profound loneliness and pain. Martha felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The beautiful apartment, the expensive clothes, the easy money, it all felt dirty, tainted. The dream she had so desperately chased had morphed into a nightmare, and the person she had looked up to had been living a life of quiet desperation all along. The next morning, the air between them was thick with unspoken truths. Martha watched Princess move about the apartment, her face a mask of weary professionalism, and a cold anger began to simmer beneath her shock. She couldn't hold it in any longer. "Princess," she said, her voice trembling, "I know." The two words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her discovery. Princess froze, her back to Martha, her shoulders stiffening. She didn't have to ask what Martha meant. Her silence was an admission, a silent surrender to a truth she had worked so hard to conceal. When she finally turned, her face was devoid of the usual gloss, her eyes shadowed with a profound sadness Martha had only glimpsed before. The confrontation that followed was not a shouting match but a quiet, heartbreaking exchange of realities. Princess tried to justify her choices, explaining that life in Lagos was hard, that a girl from a humble background had to do what she had to do to survive. She spoke of the city's unforgiving nature, of her own failed dreams, and of how this path, though painful, was the only one that had offered her a semblance of comfort and control. But Martha couldn't see it that way. She saw a cousin she had once admired, now a stranger, trapped in a gilded cage of her own making. The pain was too much. The city she had so eagerly sought was not a land of opportunity but a dangerous place of broken promises and shattered innocence. She regretted ever leaving her home, ever falling for the glittering lies of Lagos. The days that followed were a blur of coldness and disappointment. The once bright city lights now seemed harsh and unforgiving, and the apartment, once a symbol of success, felt like a prison. Martha spent her time in quiet contemplation, her mind a whirlwind of memories from ABA and her brief, tragic experience in Lagos. She replayed Princess's words, her justifications, and her own naive hope, and with each passing moment, her resolve hardened. The dream of a different life had been a mirage, and the reality was a bitter lesson learned at a great cost. The shame was not just Princess's, but hers, for so eagerly chasing a life that wasn't real. She no longer wanted a life of quick money and empty promises, she wanted the honest, hard-earned peace she had known back home. One evening, As the city hummed with its usual nocturnal energy, Martha found Princess in the living room, her face pale and drawn. Martha's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil she felt inside. "I'm going back to ABA," she announced. Princess didn't try to stop her. She simply nodded, a look of weary acceptance in her eyes. It was an unspoken understanding between them. Martha had come to Lagos seeking a life of glamour, but what she had found was a life of quiet despair. The journey had stripped her of her innocence, but it had also given her a newfound clarity and a deep appreciation for the simple, honest life she had so carelessly abandoned. She would return to her mother, to the familiar smell of groceries and the rhythmic hum of their business, a wiser, albeit sadder, girl. The journey back to ABA was a world away from the hopeful trip to Lagos. This time, there was no wide-eyed wonder, no anticipation. Only a quiet, sober reflection and a profound sense of relief. As the bus left the sprawling chaos of Lagos behind, Martha felt a weight lift from her shoulders. With every passing kilometer, the city's grip on her heart loosened, and the familiar landscape of her home state began to emerge, a comforting balm to her bruised spirit. The red earth, the rustic villages, the familiar vendors selling local produce, it was all a sight for her sore eyes. She was returning to where she belonged, not in defeat, but in a victory of the spirit. She had seen the world and found it wanting, and in doing so, she had discovered the true value of her own humble life. When she arrived back at her mother's shop, the sight of her mother's familiar face was more precious than any luxury Lagos could have offered. The embrace was a homecoming in every sense of the word. Martha didn't need to explain the whole story. Her mother, with the wisdom of a woman who had seen the world in 100 different faces, simply understood. Martha returned to her old life with a newfound appreciation. The rhythmic work of the shop, the honest conversations with customers, the simple meals with her mother, it all felt like a precious gift she had almost lost. The girl who had left ABA had a burning desire for a life of glitter and glamour, but the woman who returned understood that all that glitters is not gold, and that the greatest treasure was the simple, unvarnished truth of a life well and honestly lived.